Welcome to the Our State Book Club podcast. I'm your host, New York Times bestselling author and North Carolina native Wiley Cash. In today's episode, we return to Asheville, North Carolina, where we sit down with Elizabeth Kostova, author of The Historian. We'll talk about what it meant to resurrect Dracula and make literary history while doing it. And for those listeners who are joining us on one of the streaming platforms, audio platforms, we have Elizabeth's wonderful kitty, Angel, here. So I'm going to pet her and get some love nibbles. But Elizabeth, thank you for joining us again for this. This is really great. So your novel, The Historian, is about a young woman, narrated in part by a young woman who is coming to terms with her family's entanglements with Dracula. Not only her family's entanglements, but how those entanglements kind of supersede her family. It's mystery and danger and like the perfect amount of Gothic romance. Can you tell us a little bit? You talked a little bit about it in the last episode, but about your early introductions to Dracula. You mentioned your father's stories that he told y'all, and then also what you did when you came home from that trip abroad as a young girl, as a young reader.
Yes, I was sharing with you how my father, a professor, took his young rambunctious family to Slovenia, which was then part of Yugoslavia. And we lived in a very old city, Ljubljana, with a castle in the middle on the top of the hill. And my father told us stories about Dracula, to watered down for kids, to kind of while away the hours when we were on a train or tired after the castle tour or having a picnic. And these stories, I realized when I was older, they were based on the Bela Lugosi movies and Christopher Lee movies that he grew up with in the movie theaters in Brooklyn. And so they always have pretty much Bram Stoker's plot.
Sure.
You know, the good guys chase Dracula back to his lair, and that's, good absolutely prevails at the end. And he made them wonderfully creepy, the way children love stories. Sure. And so fast forward quite a few years later, I was in my late 20s, and my husband and I were hiking up near Yellow Mountain, actually up on top of Yellow Mountain, near Cashers. And we came out on big, beautiful view, and I remembered being in the Balkans. Mm-hmm. And by then I had visited different parts of Eastern Europe a few times, and especially the Balkan Peninsula. And something about that view made me think about my father and being on this amazing trip as a child. We were there for 4 months. And I thought, well, a father telling a young daughter stories about Dracula, I wonder if that would make a good novel. And I'd really been wanting to write a novel. I'd written a lot of short fiction and nonfiction and some poetry, and I just couldn't find an idea big enough for a novel. And so I thought, wait, maybe that would be a good structure. Father telling young daughter stories about Dracula, but then we realized Dracula himself is listening in on the stories. Yeah. And I was so creeped out by this idea. I ran to my backpack, I got my notebook out, I wrote 7 pages of notes, which I still have somewhere. And then I realized, of course, you know how it is. As a novelist, there has to be a question.
Sure. It's not, you can't have an idea novel. You got to have something better than an idea.
There really needs to be a question. And my question, of course, was, well, why is Dracula listening? What's in it for him? Why is he here? Mm-hmm. And wasn't he done in at the end of the Bram Stoker book? Well, maybe not. And then I realized, boy, I was really in for it. If you knew ahead of time that a novel would take you 10 years to write, while you work all your jobs and keep
raise
your life
a family
and start raising
have marriage,
you probably wouldn't get started. But fortunately, you don't usually know that. Mm-hmm. So I ended up doing a huge amount of research, and as you know, it's a novel with 4 timelines.
Yeah.
Three of them are in the 20th century, the 1970s, the 1950s, and the 1930s. And one of them is the late 15th century. Mm-hmm. We have fewer resources for that one, fewer sources, I should say. But putting that all together over time really did take a lot of not only research, but organizing and reorganizing the plot.
Yeah. And not only that, but you have a wide array of characters. You have letters, you have different narrators, it's almost as if, not consciously, but you were asking, how much can a novel hold? Like, what can a novel do in all of its multitudinous voices and structures and styles? And there are just so many traditions that you borrow from to put that novel together. It's really quite amazing to see it stand as a full structure. Because I imagine there were many times where you were like, I'm going too off on a tangent that's not related to this other stuff over here.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, one of the things my editor made me cut was she said, there's one monastery too many in here. We can take only so many monasteries. I thought, she's probably right.
Yeah.
But you're right. There are 6 main characters. And in many ways, I had a real support in the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker, which I read many times while I was working on the book. And obviously, it's one of my favorites. And it is kind of a Victorian potboiler. Mm-hmm. But it has a real array of main characters.
Yes.
And every single piece of that novel is a document. Mm-hmm. Another novelist I really love for documents is Wilkie Collins. Mm-hmm. And highly recommend Wilkie Collins to anyone who wants a great autumn and winter read. Those, his novels, The Moonstone and, mainly The Moonstone, but The Woman in White, which is his masterpiece probably, is not only documents, although it contains false documents, but The Moonstone, which is a great mystery, is all documents. And Dracula is all documents. And there are even scenes in Dracula. If you haven't read it, this won't give anything away to our Gothic listening audience. But there are even scenes in Dracula where characters are starting to organize all the documents because they piled up so much.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One thing, going back to the novel, and I told you I listened to it when I went back to it, the unabridged version, which was quite wonderful. The narrators were just wonderful. The first mention of Dracula, it just does something to me. And I think to all people, the fear, I don't think there's another historical villain that packs the resonant cultural memory of Dracula. Mm-hmm. And, leading up to the release of this novel, it debuted at #1 on the New York Times, which is the definition of lightning in a bottle. How did it feel to release a debut novel with the power of Dracula? Really, that is a huge force to reckon with. What was that experience like, being out in the world with Dracula?
What a great way to ask that question. Yeah. I love that. It was lightning in a bottle, maybe lightning breaking out of a bottle a little bit. First of all, I wrote this book very much for my own pleasure. Mm-hmm. It was a first novel. I wrote it also to entertain friends and family and read aloud chapters, and it was just fun. And there's kind of a joke embedded in it, which is that, which is a joke I can make coming from an academic family, which is that for academics, their research is life or death. And in The Historian, it's literally life or death. Yes. And so I just thought this would be a really fun thing to do. And I kept doing it and doing it. And then somewhere near the end of writing it, I thought, I put so much work into this. I should at least send it to an agent. I was just getting out of grad school when I sold it. And I was actually, I had a dish towel quite literally over my shoulder and 3 kids running around and kind of wondering, and was wondering what I was going to do next when the agent I had found called and said, we're going to sell this book. And it might be a big book. And I thought, what is she talking about? So one thing that happened, I think that's a very, very astute question about what it was like to go out in the world with this colossal figure. The success of the book had a whole lot to do with Dracula, and I give Dracula credit hugely for that, because so much of what sells a book to people is the subject matter.
Sure.
And that's true of novels, whether we like it or not. I think we'd like to think it's the beauty of our writing or the care I took with this book. But really, I mean, let's say you wrote a big, big book about Santa Claus, which I thought about doing after Dracula. I thought, well, there's a real Santa Claus. Maybe we should write about him. But there's something really weird, too, about the experience of being associated with this occult figure.
Sure.
I've come to feel that the monsters who scare us the most are the ones who are the most human.
Yes.
They're very close.
That feel the closest to us.
Yeah, they're close to the bone. And there were a lot of people asking me, do you believe in this? And I would always say, no, I don't believe in this. But I believe that the myth of the vampire, which, goes back to ancient Egypt.
Sure.
Every herding community has had a vampire as a legend, as a way to explain how flocks are attacked, or, proper burial is a big part of the vampire legend. So I didn't make light of it, but I also was kind of startled by how deeply, as you say, how deeply people feel that legend.
Sure.
Maybe more deeply than I did, to be honest.
Yeah. And let me say, as someone who both knows the book and knows the publishing industry, I think Dracula can generate some buzz on the front end, but a good book is what requires legs on the back end. So it's not just Dracula. You wrote a great book, and word of mouth upon a book's release, because it could have also been very much the opposite. If you came out with the weight of Dracula with that pre-pub buzz and you wrote a bad book, I don't think we'd be sitting here. I mean, I think it could have gone the other way if the book hadn't been so great.
Well, thank you. I hope that you're right. And I poured everything I could into it as a writer. I took it very seriously in that way. And one thing I asked myself, and I think this is a departure from much Gothic literature, I tried to have intense realism in it.
Yes.
And some of that I learned from reading the magical realism of Latin American writers. That a great novel of magical realism. The only thing that's magic is the magic. There are no shortcuts.
Yeah.
Everything else is this family lives in their home, and then something that couldn't possibly happen really happens. But what makes it feel real is that everything else is real.
Yeah, all the emotions are certainly real.
And the emotions are certainly real. And I tried to ask myself throughout the historian, what if you or I went to work one day and we discovered that one of our favorite friends, colleagues, had been attacked by a vampire.
And left bloody handprints on the ceiling.
Or, you find that beloved person lying there, and their immortal soul is in danger, but they're also in terrible suffering. I know that sounds kind of cheesy when you just say it out loud, but what would be, again, the emotion, which you just mentioned, the emotion, what would be your real reaction? What if that really happened to you?
There are terrifying scenes in the book where the characters are not only I'm thinking about the scene you mentioned where he finds his friend in the hallway after being attacked and he later perishes. But also when his mentor is disappeared from his office and there's the blood that's remaining behind and they can't figure out how blood got on the ceiling. I mean, it was creepy and to be put in their feet. But then when they flee the library and the guy follows them into the church, I mean, I don't want to get too in the weeds with the novel. It is scary. I mean, there are scary moments in this book that are very human, that have, fear has nothing to do with the Gothic, in my opinion. It's just human fear. It just scares you. There's a lot of scary things in this book. We will be right back after this break with Elizabeth Kostova.
Elon University is proud to support the Our State Book Club. In the same way great authors bring North Carolina stories to life, Elon is committed to fostering knowledge, creativity, and lifelong learning across our state. Discover how Elon University shapes thoughtful leaders at www.elon.edu.
While I've been here in Asheville for the episodes with Elizabeth Kostova in October, Denise Kiernan in November, and Sarah Addison Allen in December, I've been really enjoying my stay at the Doubletree Biltmore right in Biltmore Village. I want to thank the hotel for putting me up and for taking such good care of me. We are back with Elizabeth Kostova. Elizabeth, not to get too scholarly or opinionated, but I've always read Bram Stoker's Dracula, which came out in 1897. And I think I told you I saw the play last year in Wilmington. The university, UNC Wilmington, did a very wonderful adaptation, a very scary adaptation. And we took our kids and my wife was like, this is totally inappropriate. But it was wonderful. But I've always read the novel as a novel about Victorian constraints on gender and female identity, and especially female desire, perhaps. One of your main characters in the novel, the historian, is a young female narrator who pushes back. I mean, she is the narrative propulsion. Like, she is the story starter that gets everything going. And she does not shrink from her desire for knowledge, even in the face of her father and many, many things. What kind of themes were you borrowing from, expanding, pushing aside, bringing those themes from Bram Stoker's Dracula with you and our contemporary readings of it?
Oh, that's such a great question. Yeah. And I mean, the short answer is times have changed.
Sure. Yeah.
And I read Dracula also as very traditionally Victorian.
Mm-hmm.
The women in it, the woman who expresses any desire is, handily dispatched in a horrible, evil way and becomes a vampire who has to then be vanquished as well. And the woman who is pure and good inspires all the male characters to acts of nobility and soul saving.
The angel in the house, that Victorian trope. Yeah,
very much. Mina is very much the angel in the house. So she is just so good and a wonderful character. But when I came to play with that book and that legend, I really wanted a strong female character, and I wanted a girl who was a young woman. She's only 16 when it starts, and most of it takes place before she's 18. And I wanted a young woman who not only was interested, curious, a scholar, budding young scholar in her own right, but also was willing to face danger.
Sure.
And also would save the day in some way. And she doesn't save the day alone. It's really a team effort. In fact, one of the scholars in the book says early on, Professor Rossi says, the business of historians is that each of us does a little piece of work and hands it on to the next generation of historians, building that bigger picture. But I think something else actually happens, which is that social ideas change in the meantime. Mores change, and feelings about human relations change. And that definitely was happening for me with the historian. I would have been kind of embarrassed to write any other kind of female character.
Yeah.
I sort of wanted Harriet and Spy meets Bram Stoker.
And it's an adventure novel as well. I mean,
it is.
It's there are a lot of acts of daring. This is a woman alone in Europe with a father who's often absent on, these junkets or whatever. The conventions and meetings that he's going to, and she is finding ways to subvert the restrictions put upon her, often with her own craft and cunning. It's just really, really interesting. In the last episode, we talked about your interests in folkways, old world folkways, music especially. The novels that followed The Historian, The Swan Thieves, and Shadowland explore music and art. Do you find that writing for you is a way to further explore your interests that you've already got? Or are you like, well, I don't know anything about, underwater exploration, I'm going to write that novel? Or do you just think like, I'm interested enough in this to spend years? Like, I already know I like this. I want to fall further down the wormhole.
Yeah, it's really the latter. Something I've been interested in with my second novel, The Swan Thieves. I knew I was very interested in art history. I'd studied a lot of art history, and I was interested in especially in painting and painters and movements of painters, communities of painters. But I also was really interested in this idea of taking a pretty hackneyed figure, poor old Dracula's been around the block a lot, and so have the Impressionists.
Sure.
And I wanted to see, I sort of set myself that similar challenge of, well, the Impressionists, how boring. They're on every tote bag, every mug, do we even look at their paintings anymore? Not really. They look so pretty. After the whole history of 20th century art, this is just like decor material. And then I'd always secretly liked their work, and I started reading about it and realizing and understanding better how radical they were and how outraged people were with their first exhibitions in Paris. And then understanding also, and I guess this again is kind of the feminist twist, that there was a major Impressionist painter who was in the very first exhibition, Berthe Morisot, who is not even listed most of the time. In the, if you get a list of the Impressionist painters, unless an historian is talking exactly about who exhibited in the first, show, which was such an outrage in Paris, her name doesn't even come up.
Wow.
Now. And there have been major biographies of her. All her letters are published. I thought, what is that about? And of course it was about, again, restrictions. She wasn't allowed to paint alone. She wasn't allowed to sketch in the Louvre alone.
Wow.
Because, you might see a naked statue.
Yeah. Or a woman alone is a dangerous thing.
Alone in a museum. What could happen?
Well, sure. I mean, even in The Historian, our young narrator is not supposed to be alone ever. She's always supposed to have an escort with her when she goes
when she escapes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, I wanted to take something that's kind of potentially hackneyed and see if I can make it fresh.
Sure.
And my third book is very different. It's a book that means a great deal to me. It's about Bulgaria and the 20th century history of Bulgaria. And again, a young American woman coming into a fairly dangerous situation in our era and digging down into a real dark history. And that book was difficult for me. It was because it wasn't about Dracula. It wasn't about history that you can kind of play with. It was about really tragic outcomes of totalitarianism and the Gulag in Eastern Europe. And there were days when I would get up and think, why am I going to spend another day reading about this, writing about this? And as you know, you can't make your readers, help your readers feel something unless you feel it yourself.
Sure.
So that book is about real history. It's not that my other books are inaccurate historically, but it's about real tragedy, and some, at least the children of the people who suffered in those situations, are still alive.
Sure.
And I went on book tour to Eastern Europe with that book, and it was tremendously moving, and it felt like a big responsibility. So when I had recovered a little from that writing experience, and that one took me 8 years.
Wow.
And I visited the ruins of the Gulag, actually, of a labor camp. And when that was over, I thought, by God, I'm going to write a Gothic novel again.
Yeah. So what are you working on now? You've gone back to the Gothic in the book you're working on now.
It's maybe it says something dark about my soul that I think that would be the light.
Yeah.
That's the fun.
I need more Gothic
that's
horror.
the fun stuff.
Yeah.
But it's been great fun, and I know I shared with you I'm turning it in this week, and it in it our young heroine from the historian has just died rather of a sudden illness in her 50s, and her son, whom she had on purpose as a single mother, raised alone, they're everything to each other, just great pals, both in love with history. He's left alone in the world, and she was his whole family. And although he's a social person, a teacher, he's just bereft. And he goes back to the apartment where he grew up with her in Boston, in an old section kind of haunted urban scene. And he finds something in her apartment as he's preparing to sell it that he's never seen there before. He has no idea why it's there. He doesn't connect it with any of her interests. And it wasn't there when he left the last time. And he keeps it, and he begins to investigate it a little, and things become dangerous very quickly. And this novel is tied to the history of the theater. Another art form I find so interesting, but really didn't know much about. I had to do a lot of research about the way theater was changing, developing in the late 19th and very early 20th century. And sort of to layers of Gothic. So one of the things that's very strongly at the heart of this book is the play Macbeth, which I think is one of the great Gothic stories of all.
Sure.
Yeah, obviously.
Saw that recently, actually.
Yeah. It never gets old. It's just fantastic. And of course, it's not just about the Gothic. It's about hubris and, overweening pride and leadership and power and narcissism and all those things. And so my novel is also about those things. If you were an actor, a great actor walking the boards, and you loved it so much that you wanted to do it forever, what lengths would you go to do that? So it is Gothic. I don't know if this speaks well for me, but it's been so fun.
Yeah. No, that sounds delicious.
But lots of real research again.
Well, speaking of Gothic novels, to close us out, what are maybe we're in the season of Halloween, what are 3 or 4 Gothic or horror novels that you particularly enjoy thinking about or going back to?
Well, I love that question. Of course, my old friend, everybody's old friend, Dracula by Bram Stoker. I think in many ways, although it's a psychological novel, not exactly Gothic, or let's say it's not a supernatural novel, it's a Gothic novel that's psychological. There are 2 in that category I'd like to throw in here. One is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, which I think is one of the scariest books ever written. Another is, again, Wilkie Collins, The Woman in White. We talked about that before. That is, I read that the first time I read it, I had the flu. It was, you know how you have these blue books where you just are too sick to do anything except read an 800-page novel.
Sure, yeah.
And I just could not stop. I must have read 10 hours a day once I felt well enough. And I've read it a couple times since. That is an extraordinary piece of literature. But I also really love Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we're kind of talking old war horses here. There are so many books we could talk about, including some 18th century novels. Frankenstein, obviously very early 19th century, by a woman, which is unusual for the 19th century Gothic. But it's such a deep book that it doesn't ever get old. And I had the privilege and pleasure of writing an introduction for it some years ago for Penguin Classics. They have this lovely series with covers that are kind of graphic novel covers.
Oh, that's
but the entire classic text. And those covers help draw in younger readers. And so I've written intros actually for Dracula and Frankenstein. And those are inexhaustible subjects, and the biographies behind them are really, really interesting behind those authors and possible reasons they went in those directions. But I do think we have to include Frankenstein. And if it's okay to put one more in, I'd say all of Henry James' ghost stories. Those are just, I have a friend who rereads several every single Halloween. And I just think they're easy to make fun of.
Yeah.
And some people have. Some writers have written even parodies of them. And of course, Daphne du Maurier.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Who inspired me to, her book, Rebecca, inspired me to not give the heroine of the historian, who's the mother who's just passed away. In my new book, she doesn't have a name, which is true of the narrator of Rebecca. And I think that's a really underestimated book.
Yeah.
I think because she was a female writer and female narrator and a great house, and I think it got kind of swept into a category that the writing really belies.
Yeah.
It's a very skillful narrative and beautifully written. And I'm sorry it's been sort of relegated to, you know, like early 20th century girly fiction.
Yeah, I listened to the audiobook of that one as well. It was quite good.
Isn't it good?
And the narration was very good. Well, this has been such a treat, Elizabeth. Thank you for giving us so much time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been delightful.
Elon University believes in the power of stories to engage and inspire our community. That's why Elon is proud to sponsor the Our State Book Club, showcasing conversations with writers who reflect the heart of our state. Learn how Elon University is igniting discovery and dialogue in North Carolina at www.elon.edu.
From day one at Elon University, you're empowered. Engaged learning, meaningful mentorship, celebrated individuality. Transform your potential into purpose and become a leader the world needs at Elon University.
What might it be like underneath the sunrise in a state of flight? Coming back on me, it seems wonderful, the wandering mountain birds on a beach. Never moments ever wasted, turning away from your love. Honeybees, gardens of sweeter fruit, never tasted, no turning to other things. Will you be, will you seem? Sweeter fruit, never tasted, don't turn your back on